The ultimatum of the silence of space around Earth shattered as reality itself seemed to tear open. 80 colossal ships emerged from the void, each one stretching over 15 kilometers in length. Their obsidian hulls gleamed with veins of crimson, energy that pulsed like a heartbeat. The Veilthan Empire had arrived, and with them came the weight of 1,000 conquered worlds. On the bridge of the flagship Dominion Eternal, Supreme Commander Zixtera stood motionless, her 4 arms folded. Behind her back, her crystalline exoskeleton caught the red glow of the command displays, casting intricate shadows across her angular face. 6 eyes, arranged in perfect symmetry, studied the blue-green world spinning peacefully below. This was her 40th conquest, and she had never failed. Commander, her tactical officer, Kelenov reported, his voice resonating through the ship's bioacoustic communication system. Planetary scans complete. Population approximately 8.2 billion. Primitive nuclear technology. Basic spaceflight capabilities. Their most advanced vessels appear to be simple, fusion-powered transports. Zixthera's mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among her species. Another backwater civilization that had barely crawled out of its gravity well. The pattern was always the same. They would threaten, the locals would panic, negotiations would follow, and within a standard cycle, another world would bow before the Empire's might. "Deploy the message," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been questioned. The transmission system activated, sending signals to every communication device on Earth. The message was broadcast in hundreds of human languages simultaneously, the Empire's translators having decoded Earth's communication systems within minutes of their arrival. People of Earth, Zixthera's image appeared on screens across the globe, her alien features both beautiful and terrifying. "I am Supreme Commander Zixthera of the Veilthan Empire. We rule 12,000 star systems across this galaxy. Your world has been selected for integration into our domain." In the depths of the Cheyenne Mountain complex, President Elena Cross watched the transmission with the expression of carefully controlled calm. Around her, the crisis management team sat, in stunned silence. General Patricia Wells, Earth's highest-ranking military officer, leaned forward in her chair. Dr. James Chen, head of Earth's most classified research division, took detailed notes on his tablet. "Your terms are simple," the alien commander continued. "You will provide 40% of your planetary resources to the Empire. This includes all rare metals, energy sources, and technological assets. Additionally, 20% of your population will be relocated to serve as workers in our industrial facilities across the galaxy." Admiral Marcus Kane, commander of Earth's small but growing space fleet, felt his jaw tighten. 20% of humanity meant over 1.5 billion people, men, women, children, torn from their homes to serve alien masters. The images that accompanied the message showed other worlds that had accepted these terms. Clean cities, smiling faces, prosperity and peace. But Kane had studied enough historical propaganda to recognize lies when he saw them. In return, Zixthera's voice carried false warmth. "The Empire will provide protection from hostile forces and share select technologies to improve your remaining population's quality of life. You have 10 standard days to comply. Resistance will result in the total subjugation of your species." The transmission ended with a countdown timer appearing on every screen. 10 days, 0 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. And counting down. President Cross stood slowly, her grey hair catching the harsh fluorescent light of the command center. At 63, she had led humanity through economic crises, natural disasters, and political upheavals. But nothing had prepared her for this moment. Options? She asked simply. General Wells spoke first. Madame President, our conventional forces are hopelessly outmatched. Our entire fleet consists of maybe 300 vessels, most of them cargo haulers and mining ships. Those alien warships could glass every major city on Earth in a matter of hours. What about our allies? Cross asked. The lunar colonies, Mars. Admiral Kane shook his head grimly. The outer colonies have maybe 50,000 people combined. Even if they wanted to help, they don't have the resources to make a difference. Dr. Chen had been silent throughout the discussion, but now he looked up from his tablet. There is one option we haven't discussed. Every eye in the room turned to him. Dr. Chen had been the lead scientist on humanity's most secret project for the past 15 years. If anyone had a solution, it would be him. Project Starfall is operational, he said quietly. Not fully tested, but operational. President Cross felt her heart skip a beat. She was one of only 12 people on Earth who knew what Project Starfall really was. The culmination of decades of research into exotic physics, reverse engineering, alien technology, and human ingenuity pushed to its absolute limits. Success probability, she asked. Unknown, Chen admitted. We've run simulations, but we've never faced anything like this. The theory is sound, but theories don't always survive contact with reality. And if it fails, then we become slaves to an alien empire, assuming they let us live at all. The room fell silent. Outside, President Cross knew that panic was beginning to spread across the globe. Stock markets were crashing. Governments were calling emergency sessions. Religious leaders were declaring the end times. But here, in this buried command center, the people who truly understood Earth's situation remained strangely calm. I need to know more about these aliens, Cross said finally. Everything. We can learn. Their technology, their tactics, their weaknesses. Admiral Kane nodded. I'll have our deep space monitoring stations track their fleet movements. Maybe we can learn something from how they operate. Do it, but carefully. I don't want them to. No, we're watching. As the meeting broke up, Dr. Chen approached the president privately. Alina, he said, using her first name as he had when they were both young senators decades ago. If we do this, there's no going back. Project Starfall will change everything. Not just for us, but for every species in the galaxy. President Cross looked at the countdown timer, still visible on the room's main screen. 9 days, 23 hours, 47 minutes. James, they came here expecting us to roll over and die. They want to take our children and turn them into slaves. They want to strip mine our world and leave us with scraps. She turned to face him directly. Maybe it's time the galaxy learned that humanity doesn't make good victims. High above Earth, Supreme Commander Zixthara reviewed the initial intelligence reports from her scanning teams. The humans were reacting exactly as predicted. Panic in the streets, emergency government meetings, desperate attempts to contact their pathetic space colonies. Some were even launching their primitive spacecraft, probably hoping to evacuate important individuals to safety. Commander Kelenoth approached with another datapad. The humans have sent a response. Zixthera accepted the device with mild interest. Most species sent long, rambling messages full of questions, pleas, and attempts at negotiation. The humans had sent exactly 7 words. We acknowledge your message. Preparing our response, How, Direct, she mused. No begging, no attempts to negotiate better terms. None, Commander. They also haven't asked for additional time or clarification of our demands. For a moment, Zixtara felt a flicker of something unusual in 40 conquests. She had never encountered such a concise response. But she dismissed the feeling quickly. Humans were simply a young species. They probably didn't understand the full implications of their situation yet. Very well, continue monitoring their communications. I want to know the moment they begin loading their tribute ships. Deep beneath the Colorado mountains, President Cross walked through corridors that officially didn't exist. Behind blast doors marked with warnings in a dozen languages, humanity's greatest secret was coming to life. Project Starfall had been born from a simple observation. Every alien species that had ever visited Earth had made the same mistake. They assumed that humanity's visible technology represented the limits of human capability. They were wrong. The first breakthrough had come 25 years ago, when a damaged alien probe had crashed in the Pacific Ocean. Instead of trying to reverse engineer the technology directly, human scientists had studied the underlying physics. They had learned that the universe was far stranger and more malleable than anyone had imagined. The second breakthrough had come from humanity's greatest strength, the ability to think creatively under pressure. While other species developed technology incrementally, humans had a talent for radical innovation. They took impossible problems and found impossible solutions. The third breakthrough had been the realization that Earth's apparent weakness was actually its greatest asset. No one expected a primitive backwater world to possess weapons that could challenge the greatest empire in the galaxy. President Cross entered the main laboratory where hundreds of scientists and engineers worked around the clock. At the center of the facility stood the heart of Project Starfall, a device that looked deceptively simple, just a crystalline sphere surrounded by electromagnetic field generators. But this machine could manipulate the fundamental forces that held reality. Together, Dr. Chen joined her as she watched the final preparations. The fleet commanders have been briefed. Every ship captain knows their role. We've had 15 years to prepare for this day, and our people in the shelters, safe and secure. The underground cities can support the entire population for years, if necessary. When this is over, they'll have something to be proud of. President Cross nodded. On the surface, humanity appeared to be preparing for surrender. Cargo ships were being loaded with resources. Government officials were making statements about difficult negotiations and exploring all options. The aliens saw exactly what they expected to see, a weak species preparing to capitulate. They had no idea that those cargo ships contained something very different from tribute. They couldn't detect the weapons hidden in Earth's asteroids, disguised as mining equipment. They didn't realize that humanity's primitive space stations were actually the most advanced weapons platforms in the galaxy. The countdown timer showed 9 days, 12 hours, 3 minutes remaining. But President Cross wasn't worried about the deadline anymore. In her hand, she held a small device with a single red button. When the time came, she would press that button, and the Veilthan Empire would learn that some species should never be underestimated. Above Earth, the alien fleet maintained its threatening positions, confident in their overwhelming superiority. Supreme Commander Zixtara reviewed her conquest plans one final time. In 10 days, this would all be over. Another world would kneel before the Empire's might. Another species would learn their place in the galactic order. She had no way of knowing that in less than 10 days, the survivors of her fleet would be fleeing in terror, carrying news that would shake the very foundations of the Empire. Humanity was about to send a message to the galaxy, written in fire and fury across the darkness of space. The countdown continued. 9 days, 11 hours, 58 minutes. But for the Veilthan Empire, time was running out much faster than they realized. The response the 7th day of the countdown brought an unexpected message to the Veilthan fleet. President Kraus appeared on their communication screens, standing in what appeared to be a simple government office. Her expression was calm, almost resigned. "Supreme Commander Zixthera," she began, her voice carrying no trace of fear or desperation. "After careful consideration, Earth has decided to comply with your demands. Our tribute fleet will launch in 6 hours to deliver the requested resources and personnel." On the bridge of the Dominion Eternal, Zixthara felt a wave of satisfaction wash over her. Another conquest completed without the need for orbital bombardment. The humans had shown wisdom in accepting the inevitable. Commander Kelenoth reported, "Long-range sensors detect multiple human vessels launching from Earth's surface and orbital facilities. Mass appears consistent with the requested tribute. Excellent. Deploy escort formations to guide their ships to the collection points." As the hours passed, a massive fleet of human vessels approached the alien positions. Over 200 ships of various sizes, their hulls gleaming silver in the light of Earth's sun. They moved in perfect formation, broadcasting identification codes and manifests that listed exactly what the Empire had demanded. Supreme Commander Zixthara watched the approaching fleet with growing anticipation. Soon, the holds of those ships would be transferred to Imperial cargo vessels, and 20% of humanity would begin their new lives serving the Empire. It was all so routine, so predictable. She had no way of knowing that every human ship contained exactly 0 tribute. "Human fleet now within weapons range," the tactical officer reported. "They're requesting permission to begin transfer operations." Granted. Deploy cargo shuttles to begin. The lead human vessel suddenly transformed. What had appeared to be a simple cargo hauler unfolded like a metallic flower, revealing weapon systems that belonged in no database of known technology. Energy readings spiked beyond measurement as reality itself seemed to bend around the ship's hull. "What is that?" Zixthera demanded, but her crew had no answers. The transformation rippled through the entire human fleet. 200 cargo ships became 200 warships, each one bristling with weapons that violated several fundamental laws of physics. But more alarming than the weapons was what happened to space itself around the human vessels, that stars visible. Through the fleet began to shift and distort. The fabric of reality warped as if the human ships existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Energy readings fluctuated wildly as the vessels seemed to phase in and out of existence. "Commander." Kelenoth's voice cracked with panic. "Additional human ships are appearing throughout the system." The main display showed the impossible truth. Thousands of human vessels were materializing from seemingly empty space. They emerged from behind asteroids, from the shadows of moons, and from positions that the Empire's sensors had scanned dozens of times without detecting anything. Admiral Marcus Kane stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, humanity's first true warship. Around him, officers who had trained for this moment their entire careers worked with calm precision. Behind them, holographic displays showed the complete human fleet, over 3,000 vessels that had been hidden using technology the aliens couldn't detect. "All ships report ready," his communications officer announced. Project Starfall is fully operational. Kane nodded grimly. Signal President Cross. Tell her the party is about to begin. The first demonstration of human ingenuity came when the Veilthan fleet opened fire. Massive plasma cannons that could melt continents discharged their fury at the nearest human ships. The energy beams struck their targets and simply disappeared, absorbed by field generators that converted hostile energy into useful power. Thank you for the energy donation, Admiral Kane transmitted on all frequencies. Our reactors were running a bit low, but the real shock came when the human fleet began to fight back. The UES Prometheus fired what appeared to be a simple missile at a Veilthan destroyer. The projectile moved slowly, almost casually, toward its target. The alien ship's point defense systems opened fire, but their particle beams passed harmlessly through the approaching weapon. When the missile struck, it didn't explode in any conventional sense. Instead, the Veilthan destroyer began to fold in on itself, its hull compressing as if the ship were being crushed by an invisible hand. In seconds, a vessel the size of a city block had been compressed into a sphere barely 10 meters across. Gravitational implosion warhead, Dr. Chen explained. Over the tactical network. We call it a reality check. Supreme Commander Zixera watched in growing horror as her fleet was systematically dismantled by weapons that shouldn't exist. The humans had somehow weaponized gravity itself, creating localized distortions in space-time that no shield could deflect. But gravity weapons were only the beginning. The UES Newton deployed devices that looked like simple metal spheres. When they activated, nearby Veilthan ships began to move in slow motion, trapped in temporal fields that compressed minutes into seconds. Crews aboard the affected vessels found themselves unable to react as human ships moved around them with impossible speed. Time dilation generators, Admiral Kane observed with satisfaction. Einstein would be proud. The most disturbing weapons came from the research vessel US Tesla. It fired energy beams that passed harmlessly through the hulls of alien ships, leaving no damage whatsoever. But moments later, the affected vessel's electronic systems began to malfunction catastrophically. Computers crashed, life support failed, and weapon systems turned on their own ships. Quantum virus, Dr. Chen explained to the increasingly desperate alien communications. It doesn't destroy your technology. It just convinces your computers that they're supposed to be working for us instead. As the battle progressed, it became clear that the humans had prepared for every possible Imperial tactic. When veil-thin ships tried to retreat, they found their faster-than-light drives offline. Dimensional inhibitors hidden throughout the solar system had created a zone where hyperspace travel was impossible. Going somewhere? Admiral Kane asked politely over the communication channels. I'm afraid Earth's immigration policy has changed. No one leaves without our permission. The surviving Veilthan commanders tried everything in their tactical databases. They attempted ramming attacks, only to watch their ships pass harmlessly through human vessels that had shifted into parallel dimensions. They fired every exotic weapon in their arsenal, from antimatter torpedoes to dark energy cannons, only to see their attacks absorbed, redirected, or simply negated by human countermeasures. But perhaps the most demoralizing moment came when the humans began to demonstrate technologies that the Empire had never even imagined. The UES Darwin fired a beam that struck a Veilthan cruiser and seemed to do nothing. But over the following minutes, the alien ship began to evolve. Its hull sprouted organic growths, its weapons transformed into feeding tentacles, and its crew found themselves becoming something that was no longer entirely Veilthan. Forced evolution beam, Dr. Chen announced cheerfully. We accelerated your ship's development by about 1 million years. Don't worry, the effects are reversible, mostly supreme. Commander Zixthara realized with growing terror that she was not facing a primitive species with lucky weapons. She was confronting a civilization that had spent decades preparing specifically to fight the Veilthan Empire. Every human tactic, every weapon system, every defensive measure had been designed to counter Imperial technology. How, she transmitted, desperately to Admiral Kane. How did you know we were coming? Kane's response chilled her to the bone. Commander, you've been broadcasting your approach for the last 50 years. Every species you've conquered sent out distress signals before. They fell. We've been listening to those signals, studying your methods, and preparing for this day. The truth was even worse than she feared. Humanity hadn't just prepared to fight the Empire. They had turned the Empire's own success against them. Every conquered world had provided intelligence about Veilthan tactics, technology, and weaknesses. The Empire's 1,000-year reign of conquest had given humanity the perfect blueprint for their enemy's destruction. As her fleet dwindled from 80 ships to 60, then 40, then 20, Zixthara made the hardest decision of her military career. All ships, implement emergency withdrawal protocol. Activate quantum tunneling drives. But even this desperate measure failed. The human dimensional inhibitors blocked not only hyperspace travel, but also the exotic physics that allowed quantum tunneling. The Veilthan fleet was completely trapped in a solar system that had become their prison. Commander, Admiral Kane's voice was almost gentle now. You came here expecting to enslave us. Instead, you've given us the perfect opportunity to send a message to your empire. Would you like to help us compose that message? With only 12 ships remaining operational, Zixthara had no choice but to listen. Tell your emperor, Kane continued, that Earth is off limits. Tell him that humanity has allies now among the species you've conquered. Tell him that we've been sharing our technology with every rebel group and resistance movement in your empire. The implications hit Zixthara like a physical blow. If humans could build weapons this advanced, and if they were sharing that technology with the Empire's subjects, the Veilthan Empire's reign of conquest is over, Admiral Kane declared. You can choose to acknowledge this reality peacefully, or you can learn it the hard way when 1,000 liberated worlds come calling. In a final act of mercy that would have been unthinkable just hours before, the human fleet parted to create a corridor leading away from Earth. The dimensional inhibitors powered down just long enough to allow hyperspace travel. You're letting us go? Zixthara asked in disbelief. President Cross appeared on the communication screen one final time. Commander, we're not conquerors, we're liberators. Go back to your empire and tell them what you've seen. Tell them that the galaxy has changed, and that humanity stands ready to help any species that wants to be free. The 12 surviving Veilthan ships limped toward the edge of the solar system, their crews stunned by both their defeat and their unexpected freedom. As they prepared to jump to hyperspace, Admiral Kane transmitted one final message. Oh, and Commander, if you're thinking about coming back with a bigger fleet, you should know that everything you've seen today represents about 10% of humanity's actual military capability. The other 90% is reserved for special occasions. The Veilthan survivors jumped to hyperspace, carrying news that would shake the Empire to its foundations. Behind them, Earth's impossible fleet began to disperse, some ships returning to their hidden bases, while others set course for distant star systems, where enslaved peoples waited for liberation. In the depths of the Cheyenne Mountain complex, President Cross stood before the same holographic display that had shown the alien fleet's arrival 7 days earlier. Now it showed something very different, a galaxy where the age of conquest was ending, and the age of freedom was about to begin. Dr. Chen joined her, looking exhausted but satisfied. "Elena, you realize we've just started a galactic war." She smiled, thinking of the billions of enslaved beings across the galaxy who would soon have hope for the first time in generations. "James, I think we just finished one." Above Earth, the stars shone brighter than they had in 1,000 years, as if the universe itself was celebrating humanity's victory. The Veilthan Empire had demanded tribute from Earth. Instead, they had received something far more valuable, a lesson in why some species should never be underestimated. The message had been sent, written in fire and fury across the darkness of space. Humanity was no longer hiding among the stars. They had announced their presence to the galaxy in terms that no empire could ignore. The age of human liberation had begun. Asterisk.